Since the Poodle was introduced last year, players have been asking, where are the other Polish tanks? When will we be able to play the complete branch? In this video, we'll show you the gameplay of the first premium Polish Tier 8 tank, and talk a little bit about other vehicles in the branch. We've wanted to introduce the Polish branch for a long time. Let's say it's been our long-term project. We wanted to add this nation because their tank building started developing right after the end of World War I. For us, it meant that we could find any number of vehicles to use at Tier 1. There were quite a lot of them.
After the First World War showed how effective and decisive tanks could be on the battlefield, where they made their debut, the potential of such war machines became obvious to many countries across the globe, including Poland. The first vehicles to enter service in the Polish army were the Renault FT-17. They featured an advanced layout for the time. It's a layout that became a classic, with one rotatable turret placed at the center of the vehicle. Between 1919 and 1920, Poland's efforts to bolster their army put them in fourth place by the number of tanks in service.
We had no problems compiling the beginning of the branch. But these vehicles were fit for Tier 6, maybe Tier 7 max. For the time being, the best decision was to add Poland to the mixed tech tree of European vehicles. After that, we put the work on searching for Polish vehicles on hold because we were waiting for other vehicles to create a full-fledged European tech tree. With the course of time, the World of Tanks community, especially the Polish community, offered a lot of different variants from the internet for consideration. Naturally, those vehicles were only fit for a game about space. That's how fantastic they were. But this gave us a reason and impetus to resume work on the Polish branch. We also had the opportunity to delve through the archives we had had no access to earlier. So after that, we were determined to create a complete branch from Tier 1 to Tier 10.
It would seem logical to put the Renault FT-17 or one of its variants at Tier 1 for the Polish branch, like we did for some nations in our game. But the Polish developed their own tank, the 4TP. The Polish branch will start with it. Poland had its own tank projects besides the 4TP. For example, the 7TP or the 10TP with the Christie suspension. But the problem was that the war broke out and stopped the development of Polish tanks. We had no vehicles to proceed with.
During the search for candidates for top tiers, we would come across either absolutely fantastic vehicles that couldn't fit into the setting of our games, or clones of Soviet tanks like the IS-3 or T-54.
After a long search in the Military Technical Academy in Warsaw, we found vehicle variants that we could use for Tier 8, 9, and 10 vehicles, and finally bring the branch to its logical conclusion. These vehicles were developed independently, so they weren't borrowed or copies of the tanks already existing at the time.
We will tell you about all the Polish vehicles in detail in another video. For now, let's take the premium Polish Tier 8 tank and use it as an example of gameplay for the top-tier Polish vehicles.
We couldn't just go and select a premium tank before we finalized the vehicles at Tier 8, 9, and 10. So, among the projects, we found a vehicle that met our requirements. It's an original vehicle, yet quite consistent with the branch. It doesn't have a name at the moment. We only know that it was the Project 51 tank, but it will have its own name by the time of release.
This is a classic heavy tank. You can compare it with the IS-3 or Chinese Heavy. In the first test iterations, we will try its slower but better armored version. During the test, we also want to check another variant. It's a bit more maneuverable but with less armor, so it's a well-armored vehicle in the first iteration. It can bounce shells on par with the IS-3 or heavy Chinese vehicles. It also has a thick cast turret. You can easily expose it to enemy fire. But there's one difference. Look at the gun depression angles of the Chinese tank. Only -5 degrees, not very convenient. Now the Soviet tank, slightly better, -6 degrees. And here's the Polish vehicle. Gun depression is quite good, -8 degrees. So you can play your turret in a hull-down position and use the terrain folds more conveniently. And you shouldn't worry about your gun looking up to the sky on every hillock. Moving on, the upper glacis plate armor. There's an interesting design feature. A highly sloped armor plate that makes shells ricochet off it. This also allows for bouncing off the shells of higher tier vehicles. Yes, there's one less armored spot, the driver's hatch. There's not much nominal armor there, but the relative armor thickness reaches almost 270 millimeters. Not bad for a Tier 8 vehicle. Let's continue. Side armor. Can you side scrape in this vehicle? Yes, you can, but carefully. It's not the IS-3 or Low, which can expose their sides at almost a 45-degree angle. This won't work for the Polish. You need to expose it at a slightly different angle. Otherwise, you risk being penetrated all the time. You should make the angle a little bit sharper, something like this. Now, let's talk about its dynamics. During the first test iteration, the tank won't be very maneuverable. It will lose to the Soviet vehicles a bit, but will of course outmatch any German heavies over distance. Having reached a position, the tank starts firing its gun, its main feature. Good armor penetration with a standard shell and huge damage per shot of 440 allows it to cause damage quite effectively. This is the highest damage per shot for Tier 8 heavy tanks. For example, a medium tank rolls up, you fire a shot. The medium tank responds, you roll back and fire another shot, and the medium tank has only half of its HP. This damage per shot value can impress even heavy tanks. When trading shots, you will come out victorious against any Tier 8 vehicle, except for maybe tank destroyers. So the playstyle in this vehicle isn't about firing loads of shells due to high damage per minute. It's the classic, decent, and steady gameplay. Roll into position, peek out, bounce off a shell, fire back, then roll back and repeat when possible. Let's summarize. The vehicle has its drawbacks. Low mobility, not so well armored sides compared to Soviet or Chinese tanks, and not a champion of damage per minute. But it has a very strong turret, well-armored upper glacis plate, and good gun depression angles. Also, there's decent damage per shot and high armor penetration with a standard shell. This means this tank will farm. Plus, the general gameplay. It's as easy as falling off a log. So here's the vehicle we've got. It has already been initially set up, and will go to the super test soon. Players have been asking us to talk about our plans for the vehicles in advance. Similarly to the Italian tanks, we're telling you about the future of the Polish branch early on. Obviously, all settings that we're showing you today are preliminary. They will change during the testing process. The vehicles will have their final look only after the common test. And when you take a break from researching the Italian vehicles, leave your feedback, share your opinion, and take part in the discussion of the Polish tanks. Good luck on the battlefield!